All right, let's jump right in. When we think about the founding of America, our minds usually go to big epic battles or these famous declarations, right? But what if I told you that one of the most crucial seeds of the entire nation was planted on this tiny, cramped ship, born out of pure desperation? That's what we're digging into today, the Mayflower Compact. It's this short, almost overlooked document with a legacy that is just massive. So to really get the compact, you've got to put yourself right there with them. And I mean feel the sheer terror of the moment. They finally land, and what do they see? Not some paradise, not a promised land. Governor William Bradford, he called it a hideous and desolate wilderness. I mean, just picture that. There are no towns, no one to greet them, just this brutal, raw, and totally intimidating landscape in the middle of winter. This wasn't some fun adventure. This was a full-blown survival crisis from day one.
Okay, so really try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. You are thousands of miles from anything you know. You're completely outside the authority of any king or government. And chaos? It's not just a possibility, it's knocking on the door. You've got people on your own ship starting to say, hey, nobody's in charge here. I'm going to do whatever I want. So what do? What's your first move? How in the world do you create order out of absolute nothing? This was the urgent life-or-death question they had to answer before they even stepped off the boat.
And this right here, this gets to the heart of their motivation. See, they weren't just colonists looking to get rich. They had crossed an entire ocean for liberty of conscience. They wanted to build a very specific kind of society where they could practice their faith without persecution. So when they were staring chaos in the face, their solution couldn't just be about surviving. It had to be about fulfilling that mission. And it all comes to a head in 1620. Before a single person sets foot on land to even think about building a house, they knew they had a bigger problem to solve: government. They realized, if we don't have rules that everyone agrees to, this whole dream of religious freedom is just going to collapse into total anarchy. And this is where they came up with a truly radical solution. Instead of doing what everyone else would do, write back to the king, wait for instructions from England, they did something completely revolutionary. They decided right then and there, among themselves, to just create a government. From scratch. I mean, that is a wild act of self-determination for that time. The key idea they came up with was this thing called a civil body politic. It sounds kind of fancy and old-fashioned, but the idea behind it is incredibly powerful and simple. It says that a government isn't something that's just forced on you by a king. No. It's a group of people who willingly agree, who consent to be ruled by laws that they make themselves for the good of everybody. And these are the exact words from the compact itself. It's just a few words, but man, they represent a huge shift in thinking. By putting their names on this document, these guys were agreeing to form their own political group. They weren't just obeying power, they were creating it. It was basically a contract they were all making with each other. An idea this big doesn't just pop out of nowhere, right? What on earth gave this small, struggling group of people the guts to think they could just make a government? Well, it all really rested on two powerful ideas that were totally intertwined in how they saw the world. So on the one hand, you've got this political idea of self-government, this radical belief that they had the right to make their own rules. But just as important, maybe even more so, was their faith. Governor Bradford wrote about how they believed God's providence guided us. So for them, this wasn't just some political experiment, it was a spiritual journey. And that faith gave them the strength, the resilience, and the moral conviction that they could actually pull this off. So you can really see how it all unfolds, step by step. First, you have the crisis, landing in this desolate wilderness, which forces their hand. Then you have their deep motivation, this liberty of conscience, which gives them a clear goal. The solution to the crisis is to form a civil body politic to keep things from falling apart. And the foundation for this whole new society? It's built on those two pillars: self-government and faith. And here's the real takeaway. The Mayflower Compact was so much more than just a quick rule book for a few settlers. It was a blueprint. It set a precedent for a government based not on some king's divine right, but on the consent of the people being governed. It just goes to show how a moment of pure crisis can spark an act of incredible creation. I mean, the legacies are just huge. It laid the groundwork for a government of the people. It wove together this idea of civic duty with religious purpose, which really defined a lot of early American culture. On a practical level, it gave them the rules they needed to survive that first brutal winter. And in the long run, that core idea, a government created by a social contract, would echo more than 150 years later in the words, "We the people." It became a cornerstone of American democracy. So when you boil it all down, it comes to this powerful combination. The story of the Mayflower Compact really shows us that from the very beginning, the American experiment was being molded by two incredible forces working together: the radical political idea of self-government and this deep, profound spiritual conviction of faith. And it leaves us with this really fascinating question, doesn't it? How does a makeshift solution, scribbled down on a ship in a moment of total panic, end up echoing through the centuries to become a founding principle for one of the most powerful nations in the world? It's an amazing reminder that sometimes the biggest ideas really do have the smallest, most desperate beginnings.